Welcome to the podcast where we keep it real, talking all things women on the Eikonic Woman Show with your host, Michelle Watson, author, founder, public speaker, and certified performance coach. Get empowered and inspired while learning about overcoming adversity, spirituality, life, and business strategies that will help you achieve your goals. And now, here's your host, Michelle Watson.
Hey there, guys, and welcome once again to the Eikonic Woman Podcast, a place where we keep it real, talking all things women. And I am your host, Michelle Watson. And again, today I have with me a phenomenal woman, an iconic woman. This woman is an author, she's a speaker, she's also a podcast host. She's been awarded multiple times for various different things, and she is out there spreading a message that not only you, but others also need to hear. And so I would like you to join me in welcoming none other than Pamela Haynes. Pamela, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Michelle. And describing me as an icon has made me step back a little bit. Yeah.
No, but you are, because you know what it is? I think sometimes when you do something naturally, without even realizing the impact that you're making, we tend to not see ourselves as being in certain positions because it's coming from the heart, and you're not doing it for, you're not doing for a hand clap, or obviously we appreciate that, but you're doing it from a place of the heart. And that's why I'm so happy to have you here on this podcast, being an author yourself as well. And one of the interesting things that I read when reading your bio is that you are an ex-probation officer. And in my head, the first question that went off, which tends to happen with most of my guests, is what connected this journey? How did you get from being an ex-probation officer to doing and being what you are now?
Okay, I mean, originally I used to work for Her Majesty's Crown Prosecution Service.
Oh, wow.
So I was that person at the Crown Court when you saw the barrister in his or her get-up and wig and gown, and there was always someone sitting beside them or behind them taking copious notes. That was me. That's where I started my career, and I found that we were seeing the same young people come into the criminal justice system, get sentenced, and then 6 months later, 9 months later, they were back in court again. Wow. And I felt very much that I was part of the problem and not part of the solution. And what I did notice was that the probation service used to write social inquiry reports to advise the court how to sentence somebody. And at that time, we weren't privy to what was written in those reports. But I felt they were quite influential, because especially when you thought a young person was going to prison, that was the only sentence possible. But they would come up with alternatives. And I wanted to be part of that influencing the judiciary. Yeah. So I literally walked across the road and I joined the probation service as an unqualified probation service assistant. I used to write letters to prisoners. I used to send them Christmas cards. I used to accompany them to drug rehabs and so on. Did lots of work with young people. Their first trip for some of them to go to France for the day, and so on. So I felt that I was, helping in terms of working in the youth justice system. I stayed there for 5 years, and then I got the opportunity to train at Kingston University. Knowing me, I don't do things the easy way. I always find a hard way to do it. So I already had an 18-month-old son, and my baby was 3 months old when I started at Kingston. But you know what? I started off as a D student. My very first essay was a D. And by the time I finished my diploma in social work, I was an A student. So I could see my growth. And I stayed in the probation service until recently in a variety of different roles. And I really enjoyed it. So I retired as a senior probation officer in 2018. But before I get there, I was always writing reports. I was writing court reports. I was writing reports for some of the strategy board meetings that I was chairing as well, and staff appraisals, you name it. So I've always told some kind of story about the offender's journey and how they got before the courts in particular. I also ran the domestic abuse program. And I ran that program for 5 years, alongside my full-time job. A lot of people shy away from working with particular offenders, but that was the exact group that I felt needed help. Again, wanting to influence. And me and my co-facilitators, we would mirror what positive relationships look like as well when you're working with other professionals. And I've always wanted to write my own story, so I've got my little bucket list of things that I wanted to do. I wanted to do a master's, I wanted to write a book, and I wanted to go on a cruise. So the older you get and you start reaching these milestone birthdays, you think, right, what do I need to do now in 2016? What can I do now so that in 2018, when I reach my milestone birthday, I imagined myself walking across the stage, with my new cap and gown, having my masters. I visualized myself, on a cruise ship, sitting on, a bench and watching the world go by. And I also dreamt about writing a book. Nothing happens by chance. I happened to go to an award ceremony. My friend was picking up an award, and I was her plus one.
Okay.
And while I was on a table of phenomenal women, these women were iconic. These women were all picking up on an award. And I happened to sit next to a woman who'd just written her book. Her name is Marcia Spence.
Okay.
And her book was next to her, Geraldine's Pearl. I bought her book, and I say what I always say: one day I'm going to write a book.
One day.
And she said, well, stick with me. I'm moving into publishing.
Nice.
And I would love to help you realize that dream. Because I had the title. I've been sitting on the title of my book for about 20 years.
Wow.
So she...
20 years,
That's right. But it was still there. It was still burning,
Not
still a
desire,
still something that was on my bucket list.
Yeah.
So she helped support me, writing a report and creative writing is two different things. But there were some transferable skills in terms of trying to meet a deadline. So I knew that I was driven. I knew I wanted to get it done.
That's the sticky one.
And she helped support me and empower me and enable me. And my book was published.
What's the title of that first
8 weeks? I think 8 weeks before my milestone birthday. So that book is called Loving the Brothers.
Loving the Brothers, I love it. And so, what is that book based around? Because I know that obviously it touches on some of what we're gonna be speaking about today, and it's very good to also hear from the other side, and that's what I found powerful. Many times we don't hear the other side of things. So share a bit with me about what the book is about.
Well, they always say, write what you know about. So having run this domestic abuse program for 5 years, I have come up, I was given hundreds and hundreds of stories from the men who were on the program, what their journeys was like. And whilst Loving the Brothers and my second book, Loving the Sisters, they're both fiction. But they are based around the cycle of abuse. So I was able to write this fictional story. So in short, one of my characters, Patty, is a senior probation officer, just like me. As I said, write what you know about. So and she runs the domestic abuse program. One of the other women, Charmaine, is a mother of two, but in the marriage on her own. So she's a married woman, but doing everything by herself with twin, with a boy and girl twin. And my last character, Rose is a pastor's wife with 5 children, 5 girls. And she's torn between the expectations of the church and the commitment to her marriage. So she would describe herself as chief cook and bottle washer. Anything that's going on, there's an expectation that she should be involved. And more importantly, her husband wants to try for another baby.
Oh, wow.
And she doesn't. After 5 children, she's had enough. So there's all those kind of tensions that are there. The 3 women are with the Morgan brothers, and that's where Loving the Brothers has come from. They're actually brothers. And as the reader gets to find out how these couple meet, and what's happening below the surface, the services of their marriages, and that's the basis.
And one of it is around domestic violence, and so I guess this is the area that we really want to go into it and really speak on, because as you know, for myself, I have experienced domestic abuse, so I guess I'm from the other end of the fence, where I would now be very interested to hear like what the men say from their side of the fence. With my story, I didn't go to the police, even at one point when they were called and they were asking me what's happened, and I didn't disclose to them, what was happening to me. And I guess now that I've stepped out of it, now that I've grown, now that I'm a Christian and I'm in a place of forgiveness and being able to love even the worstest of characters you could think of,
right,
it's helped me because I was able to now look at, okay, what was his journey? What did he experience? And it's not that you're making an excuse for the individual. But I had to do that in order to help me move forward. But then there's a lot of women that would say, no, I'm not interested in hearing this. He did what he did, and that's the end of the story. How would you relate with something like that? Because obviously you've seen a different side to that individual. And I know a lot of people use the narcissistic word and say, they just act the part and cry when they think they want somebody to comfort them. But in some ways, they're still a human being, right? So
I mean, to say that none of us come with this empty.
Yeah.
When we enter relationships, we all come with different baggage. And I'm glad that you said that there is no excuse. There is no excuse for domestic abuse. But it's about understanding what somebody's journey is like to get them to the point where they are. Like I said, when we were dealing with offenders, I used to tell the court their story, what happened that led up to them. So we're looking at probably 5 criminogenic areas. So we were looking at, their opportunities to have employment, some people were experiencing homelessness, some had literacy and numeracy problems in terms of education. There was a number of factors that we would have to look at and explain to the magistrate what brought them to this particular point. And I suppose when it comes to domestic abuse, everybody has a story that brought them to that point where they committed the offence. And very often, men who commit domestic abuse also experience domestic abuse when they were children. So that's a very important factor. At least 1 in 4 children have witnessed domestic abuse or been in the room adjacent when domestic abuse is occurring. Now, if you grow up believing that that's the only way that you can get your point across, is to act out in a particular way, then that's what you're going to grow up and do. Fortunately, the majority of men will say there's no way, having experienced what I experienced in my childhood, will I ever take it out on the person that I claim to love or my children and so on. But there are some who creep into those behaviours that they see working for them because they're able to then control everything, and by controlling everything, that keeps them safe, but it damages everybody else around them. So that's where I would start from, really, that a lot of people have experienced, and women too, experience domestic abuse as children, and therefore they think it's part and parcel of a relationship. And the number of young people that I have come across who believe that violence and controlling and coercive behaviour is just what relationships are all, all around. They don't know any different.
Yeah, and I guess just like in life, people tend to go either end of the extreme, isn't it? You'll get someone that will say, you know what, I don't ever want my children to experience what I experienced, and they do everything in their power for that not to happen. And then you have another one that goes to the extreme of doing exactly or even worse than what they experienced. And it's so, I'm sitting now and I can smile about it, but I'm picturing myself back in my 20s going through what I went through. I don't think I would want to be your friend. You know what I'm saying? And that's how some women would look at it. And that's the truth. They would look at it, why would you want to understand or even give leeway to hearing what that individual has to say after what they've done? Because some men have done really bad things. When I look at my experience of having food thrown in my face, being kicked, being hit, being all of these things, and then it's almost like having to have a conversation now with somebody that is saying to you, what he did isn't right. However, he still deserves freedom, or he still deserves to be able to build his life, or you have to look at his past and what he experienced, because I'm sure you must have come across maybe discussions along your journey.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I do what I do.
Yeah.
Because I felt the program was very successful.
Good.
You know, we're talking, while we were working with the men, there were organisations like Victim Support and other support services, you know, that deal with women who are working with the survivors of domestic abuse. Because believe it or not all relationships end because domestic abuse is occurring. Yeah. Some are still in the relationships with with their partner. And that's how we started the session, really, right at the beginning, when we had an introduction in every session. It was, what's your name? What's your partner's name? What's your children's name? You know, has there been any violence that have occurred in the last 24 hours? Have you imbibed alcohol or drugs in the last 24 hours? Those kind of details that we would ask in a group setting. And we would also get intelligence from the police. We would get intelligence from the woman. And unless these behaviours are challenged, then there is no way for the man to change. But you have to create an atmosphere where the man is able to talk freely and not feel as though they're being judged by what they're saying. So you judge the behaviour, not the person.
The individual.
Yeah. So for example, you know, embarrassment, really. I do remember one saying, I just gave her a few slaps. But we know from our paperwork, they actually broke her jaw.
Wow.
Yeah. And obviously the relationship ended. But we weren't going to let him get away with minimising the behaviour. And we weren't going to let him blame her for what happened. So, okay, I think she asked him to get up off the sofa and do some housework or whatever it was. She knows how to press my buttons and all these kind of behaviours. We challenge those. So it's about listening to the story and listening very carefully to what the man is saying, and without being judgmental, but saying, you know, what you're saying doesn't make sense. So help me to understand and unpick what you're thinking. For example, you know, you claim to never have any money, but your drug habit means that you're spending £300, £400 of the household income. Yeah. And then you are upset because you can't do the things that you want to do for your family. So we point out those anomalies that they just don't make sense. And then you see the light bulb moments come on for the man, because these men are going to leave that group. They're going to either go back to their partners, or they're going to form new relationships, and those old patterns will then continue. So my job is very much about breaking those patterns, breaking those cycles, helping them with their light bulb moment so that they could then change their behaviour. And what I liked about the programme is that 9 months on, we were still checking in with these men. 18 months on, we were still checking in with them, which is why I felt it was a beneficial programme, and I felt it was important to be part of it.
Yeah, I think it's very good. And I know, again, for some people, they may be like, well, no, I don't think so. But I think it is good because it's just like what you say, you know, you can either open the door for them to just go back and do the same thing again, because the only thing that's going to happen is if they don't, after they've come out of prison, they're going to come back out and it's going to be a repeat offender, you know, hitting women again, etc., going through that same motion. Or it's a case where they've not been reported, like in my case, they've not been reported, but then they go into another relationship and then they repeat the same thing. Or as you rightly said, it could be brought to the forefront, and now they're in a position where they're having to address the situation and deal with it, but also get help or get into the root of that matter, because as you rightly said, a lot of it starts from somewhere. There's something there embedded from the root.
I mean, it's a difficult program. I've had men who have said, you know what, I'd rather go to prison than to be on the program.
Oh, wow.
Because in prison they don't have to think about their behaviour. In prison they don't have to change. Some of them get such short sentences, there's not time to do the therapeutic work with them in a prison setting, so they come out a few months later and they're back to their old routine. When you have a man that's reporting on a group twice a week, just to do the group, probably seeing a probation officer outside of that time as well. You've got social services involved. You've got all these groups of people who are coordinating to keep the family safe. It's a hard, some of them have to go through a lot to even be able to see their children again. So there are programs, that called Caring Dads, for example, which will give them the skills of how to communicate and to effectively care for their children. And the probation service was involved in delivering that program as well. So some of them have quite a few hurdles to jump before they could even, be in the same room. Absolutely.
Yeah, understandable, because it's like how, that woman is going through the whole scenario again, just even being in that same room with that person. Because I remember for me, it took a while before I could be in the same space as this individual. Right? So even when it was, maybe because he still had communications with family members, so even if we were having a family event and he was there, I would leave. One, because I hadn't yet forgiven, so I had a lot of anger, a lot of bitterness and resentment within me, but I could not stay in the same environment. I felt like I couldn't breathe the same air you're breathing. And so it's so hard, because it's like you're saying to the woman, in order for things to move on, we kind of need you to be able to forgive. We need you to be able, in some sense, because in order for it to run smoothly, they're going to have to communicate at some point because of the children. Obviously the ones that have taken the partner back, we'll get back to that in a minute. But in order for it to work for the child, she's going to have to get to that point where she's going to be like, I'm going to have to deal with this man. And I know for me at that time, I didn't want nothing to do with him. You know what I'm saying? So I can see how it's hard, but at the same time, I can see if this program wasn't there, men would be going back out into society and just not dealing with the root and doing whatever it is again. And I think a lot more of this needs to happen for men.
And I agree with you. And by the time the probation service gets involved, it's already too late. Yeah, because they will already have committed the offence. They would have already gone through the criminal justice system. They would have already gone to prison or been on probation. Then the group happens. And I would like to see a program like this, adapted in places, but essentially a domestic abuse program, a program about respect, a program about relationships, a program about how do you foster positive relationships, how do you develop good communication skills. And I do believe that this a program like that should start when young people are at school, as early as possible. And at secondary school, when they are now trying to sort out their own feelings, their own sexuality, their own personal development, alongside that should be something around what is consent, for example. And you would be surprised by the number of young people who don't know what consent is. Right? Because they're listening to the Andrew Tates of this world. They're listening to influencers on social media.
100%. The music that is out there. And again, and I love what you said, because it's so true, because I believe it's important that it's something that young people are open to from a young age. And I believe it was BBC that was showing something the other day where they had gone into schools and they were letting the children do role play around domestic abuse and all of these things, and picking up the signs. And I thought, wow, that is so important, because from the young age, the girl gets to understand and know her value and what she should and should not settle for. And the boys as well know about how to respect a woman, because that's just out the window. And I think that's what makes it so easy now, because a man feels like I'm a man when I put my hand on my woman. But then you have women actually that believe, oh my God, if my man hits me, he loves me.
That's right. That's right. I've heard those things. Oh, he loves me, or he's just jealous. Of, and they don't have any understanding that how that could be so wrong, and so damaging.
Yeah.
In the UK, 2 women each week die because of domestic abuse at the hands of their current or former partner. And we saw during the pandemic these figures rise globally.
Because the men were constantly in the house.
They were at home.
Yeah, so whereas the woman could have gotten a few hours of escape by him being at work or being out on the street, now he's within the 4 walls and she becomes the beating post. And it's really sad, because when I think about, when I was going through the motions, I remember having times asking myself, like, Misha, what am I doing here? Like, how did I get to how? Because I remember there was one night. There was one night, there was nothing. There was no words that he didn't call me. And I remember locking myself in the bathroom. And I remember sitting in the dark, and I'm sitting there, and I'm just reflecting on my school days and being a part of the debate team and all of these things. And I'm like, Michelle, where are you? Because I completely lost the identity of who I was. And it happened so easily and so quickly without you realizing that you've actually been shoehorned down a tunnel without realizing it. And with women, we tend to have this nurturing thing about us to say, oh, he will change. Because mine, I call him Jekyll and Hyde. He was so lovely. He would buy the cakes. He would do candlelit dinner. He would do all of these things. And then when you see that, you're like, oh, no, I can make this work. He's so nice. I can make this work. When it came to the children, absolute beauty. So you're like, I can't take him away from the children. And so you go in this repeat cycle, and then it happens again, and you're like, oh, he cries and he says it's not going to happen again. Because Pam, I tell you now, that's why I said your task must have been difficult, because I tell you now, you could have times where you would have come to my house and you would have seen my house demolished, and you would have seen him and you would have not believed that he did it, because he's crying, tears.
Yeah. And it doesn't just, domestic abuse doesn't happen to a particular woman.
Yeah.
It happens to all women.
Yeah.
So I had close friends who, one of them was going through domestic abuse, and I picked up on subtle things. He could change the atmosphere in the room just by walking in it.
Wow.
But yet still he was like, oh, Sister Pam, it's so nice to see you, and blah, 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 blah. Later on, when she exited the relationship, she escaped and went into a women's refuge.
Wow.
She told me that he never liked me. Because he knew that I would have something to do with her escaping him. Yeah, but you would go there, and she had a beautiful glass table, coffee table, not dissimilar from this. It had glass in the middle, and then the glass would be broken. Her favourite things, broken, punch in the wall, punch in the door, and you're trying to ask what happened there, and you're given these plausible explanations, but they just don't sit right with you. I've had colleagues who were senior barristers, at the CPS, and one of them was going through domestic abuse. Her entire salary went into his account, and because he I think he failed the bar a few times, so he would take it out on her. Oh, you might be this at work, you might be a barrister at work, but when you come home here, you have to serve me and make sure, and spend her money for her. So, it just doesn't happen to a particular class of people. It happens. It's rife in the church. Yeah. It's absolutely rife in the church. And I was scheduled to go into a particular church to speak to the congregation about domestic abuse. My colleague who invited me told me that there was a particular woman that had a black eye coming to church, and the committee met. And they decided not to invite me because I was not of the same denomination as them. And we just had to roll with that. The good thing about having a book is that the book can travel through the congregation.
Places.
The women read it and they pass it on to the next woman. It can go, even though you're not there physically, your book is your calling card, and that travelled amongst the congregation. So they would rather not raise awareness about domestic abuse because I was not the same denomination as them.
And what I have realized is that for some as well, because they always say, the church does not believe in divorce, does not believe in divorce, so you should stay in that marriage. So even if the person is killing you, right, some pastors want to turn a blind eye to it and say, no, you have to stay because, God doesn't believe in divorce, but then God doesn't believe in, the husband murdering the wife.
Not at all.
And you know what I'm saying? And we've seen it so much. The time when I realized that I needed to exit was when I woke up once, because at this point we were sleeping in separate rooms, and I woke up around 2:00. I don't know, I keep saying it's Holy Spirit. I woke up and he was standing over me.
Oh my.
And I said, yep, that's not happening again. I was like, we're not sleeping under the same roof again. And I dread to think what was going through his mind at the time. I have no idea, but I just said to myself, you ain't gonna get that chance again, because I know I wouldn't sleep, right? So we see so much of women being killed and women being taken to a place where it's almost like they have no control for their life anymore. They don't even own their life. They're just living. They're just walking, living, right? And I was nearly there, because I got to a place where I attempted suicide. I was nearly there. So I know how deep and how dark it can get for a woman that is going through that. And I guess my question is, when you've had conversations with these men, do they understand the depths? Obviously some won't, but have you had interactions where some of them actually understand what they've actually done? Because what we realize is that some women go on and then they never end up in a relationship again. Some of them, they actually say, you know what, I don't even want a man. They end up going the other side.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? So I don't know if they actually realize that they've planted a seed, and unless the woman has worked on herself, they've planted a dangerous seed.
I mean, you've hit the nail on the head, really. It's about the woman being able to do the work on herself.
Yeah,
and, you know, and perhaps forgiveness is part of that journey. Perhaps it
definitely
isn't. It doesn't have to be, in my opinion. It doesn't have to be. I'm led by the woman, what she wants to do in her situation. But what tends to happen is that some women jump from one relationship to another relationship to another relationship without doing the work. So she can never see herself by herself. Yeah. But so she's been so worn down that the only way she sees herself as a person is when she has a significant other. And very often the significant other isn't a good person either. You know, there are some men who seek out women that they can see flaws in. So
it's almost like the weaker vessel sort of thing, isn't it?
Absolutely. So you know, in my opinion, I am driven by wanting women to see themselves, that you can be whole, you can be in a comfortable position financially, you can reach your goals, you can aspire, you can self-actualize without having that man, wherever he is, or woman, whether she is, complements you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes
rather
sense.
than being
Like
your
it's a
all in all.
necessity for you,
Right?
And I do absolutely love that, because I guess the question I was gonna ask you is, then do you believe that it's down to the woman? Like, do you believe that the core of this is down to the woman, in the sense of when the woman knows her value? Obviously, a man can do it. It can happen. You can have a conversation and it's not expected, but then it's about what they then do from there on out.
Do you know what my dad did? I'm one of 5, so I have 2 sisters and 2 brothers. And whenever we decided that we wanted to leave home or be in a relationship and then perhaps move out, he always told us to hold on to our door keys. The front door keys. And I have done the same thing, even though I've got all boys. I've got a stepdaughter as well, but all boys. they hold on to their door keys. I've had one, he's just moved to Manchester to be with his partner. I'm ever so happy for them. But he's got his front door key. It doesn't matter what time of the day or night it is. Don't let anyone make you feel as though you don't have any choices, that you're trapped in a situation. You can come home. Definitely. And at some stage, we've all come home for different reasons. But we've had our front door key that we can open the door. So I suppose it's about knowing that it doesn't matter how bad things get out there, you can always have a base. You can always come home, and there's always options. You always have your front door key. And I suppose men can be very charming in the beginning. They call it the honeymoon period. And when things go wrong, women hold out for that honeymoon period again, when they were really nice, when they were courteous, when they were loving, when they were buying the flowers and all of that. And that's why they get trapped in their cycle, because that honeymoon period comes, will end at some point. It's like watching a kettle on the stove. You just don't know when it's going to boil over. So there's that tension that builds up in the meantime, when my character describes it as walking on eggshells. She doesn't know. That's
exactly
what's going to, when he's going to explode.
When he's going to snap, what you're going to say that's going to make him react.
Right.
I remember it was so bad. I would ask for every overtime at work that I could get, just so that I don't have to go home. So even though the kids were there, and I would have loved, as a mother, you can't wait for the day to be finished, so that you can shoot home. For me, it was the opposite. I was dreading to go home, not because the children were there. I wanted to be there with them, but I dreaded going home because I didn't know what I was going to get. What does that day look like for me? And so, but even along with that, because you were saying about having a base, but the only challenge is the shame.
Well, this is it. I mean, one of the major things that we discuss with the men on the group is isolation, and how they isolate the woman as well. And I've heard some horror stories. These are not even probation stories. I'm talking about stories from, friends and family friends that tell me that isolation plays a big part, So isolating you geographically. So I've had women suddenly, guess what, Pam? I'm off to the States, And I'm like, you don't have a green card. You don't have all the paperwork that you need to say that you can practice, right? So it might sound idyllic, I'm being whisked off my feet and taken, to these places. But then you're then solely reliant on the man. And you're, I've had a woman who came from Zimbabwe to the United Kingdom, and her husband always held her immigration status over her, because he hadn't yet filed her paperwork for her to have permanent leave to remain here. Again, so it's all of those kind of things that, took her away from her family, took her to the United Kingdom. She can't practice as a social worker here yet. Her paperwork, and every time she kept on raising it, it caused more arguments between them. So isolation can happen very quickly, and before you know it, they're criticizing your friends. So and so is dressed like a whore. So and so looks like a prostitute. Why would you want to go out with them when you could go out with me? Picking her 100%. Up from work, it all seems all nice. The man picking you up from work, and that's fine. But then it slips into, I'm not coming home. Don't bother picking me up. So-and-so from work is going to give me a lift because he's passing that way. Right. So then it gets flipped. Okay. Because a man is dropping you home from work. Right, or, I'm going to go out with my friends after work. That then becomes a problem. So it starts off with subtle meaningful intentions, and then if you're not careful, it can quite easily slip into a domestic abuse situation where you feel obliged to okay, I'm just gonna to keep the peace, I'm not gonna go out with my friends. I've heard of somebody who didn't want to go to his girlfriend's work do. They're all solicitors, she's a legal exec, and he's a builder. So he feels out of place. Yeah. He can't hold his own. He is the one that's got the hang-ups about it. So he orchestrated an argument so that she would go on her own. and made her feel so bad that while she was at the party, she was thinking about what she was going to return to at the end of the day. So some men are very manipulative. They know what they're doing, and it's calculated. But one of the very first things that you see happening is that woman gets isolated. Your mum can't come here. It's Ramadan now. So when we have Eid later on, I think at the end of the month when Eid, or end of next month when Eid happens, I've had, Muslim women tell me that when they're supposed to go and celebrate with their family, the husband says, no, I don't want to leave the house. Or they can't drive, so they can't take themselves, and he refuses to take her. So then she soon loses touch with her family and her community. So it can happen any religion, any class. It doesn't matter about your level of education.
Doesn't.
The strategy is still the same.
No, it's so true, because even some of the stuff that you were saying, I can relate to so much. He would start degrading my friends, saying something about my family, or my family doesn't like us being together. So it was everything to make you feel as if I am the only person that's got your back. I am the only person for you. But then what happens is the shame of you having to go and tell family members, because it took a long while before my family knew, because I felt like a failure. I felt so ashamed, because I felt like, oh my God, how could I make this happen to me? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, how do I even go and say, what is the first word that I even say? So it got to a really bad phase before my family knew anything. And when it happened at the beginning, they didn't believe it. Because he was a gem.
Yeah.
So they didn't believe it.
I mean, I'm reading a book at the moment. I'm reading it when I was on my way here, and it's called Tomorrow I Become a Woman.
Oh, wow.
And when she does open up, the character experiencing domestic abuse, when she does open up, her brothers want to, they want to deal with him. In fact, they do deal with him quite badly in the book. But they are scolded by their mother.
Oh, wow.
He's a good man. You're going to bring shame on the family. Shame is a big thing.
It's a big thing, isn't it? It's shame.
Yeah, you're going to embarrass your husband. He's a deacon in the church. You're going to, all these kind of things. And it's a woman that was doing that. So what if your husband gives you a few slaps? You probably did something to antagonize him. And throughout the whole book, he beats her in front of her children, and it's just getting worse. So on my way back, I'll have to let you know how the book
goes. It
how the
sounds
book
like one
ended.
that
I will finish it today.
But it's somebody's seen that, and we think, oh yeah, it's just a book. But no, it's happening in real everyday life. A daughter going to tell the mom this, and maybe the man is rich, and the mom is like,
that's right.
Nah, he's a good man. He's taking care of the home, because of money, and you're gonna put money above your daughter.
Yeah, it was the whole thing about the family. His family may ask for the bride price to come back, like the dowry, and those kind of things. And to be honest with you, Michelle, when I wrote my 2 books, I never expected the reaction that I got. This was a passion project, something that I've wanted to do, tick off my bucket list. And I was overwhelmed by the amount of people who contacted me on social media.
Yeah, no, but I could see that. I genuinely could see that, because you didn't just speak about the woman from the loving the sisters side of things. You don't tend to hear from the male's perspective side of things. You don't get to hear what happens or what goes through their mind after the fact.
I mean, I have to say, both books are from the women's perspective. It's about how they love these brothers. In fact, one of the protagonists, Rose says, "You think loving these brothers is easy? Well, it ain't.
Oh, don't worry,
because there's a dimension. Right, there's a dimension of. It's not just happening to every woman, but there's something about, discrimination in the criminal justice system, why Black women do not want to report on Black men.
Yeah.
Because, what happens in the book, I'll give you a spoiler alert. The neighbours call the police when when one of my couples are fighting. And the police it's not just one car that turns up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We know the drill.
there's about 30 police officers that turn up. Meat wagons on the road. The whole street is lit up like a Christmas tree. And this man is dragged out of the house in front of the neighbours. So that element again about shame and embarrassment. But also she is worried that they're going to kill him, because when the police are called in some situations, the man ends up dead. Yeah, we're talking about his historic cases where black men end up dying at the hands of the police. She doesn't want him killed. She just wants the violence to stop. So there's this level about, can I trust the criminal justice system to behave in a way that's going to get the violence to stop? But not at the detriment of the man being killed as a result of it. So, I have seen cases where the police have been called to the address and a woman ends up fighting the police because of, do you understand what I mean? Because she's fearful. That man is still the father of their child. She may still have some level of love for the man, but statistically we know how these situations may end up. Hence the reluctance of black women to call the authorities when these things are happening. You didn't call.
I didn't call, and even when an incident happened that enabled me to say, yes, this is what is happening, I still didn't call. Like, literally, let me tell you how bad this was once, right? How I nearly got locked up, despite the fact that he was the one that really should have been locked up.
Yeah.
There was a day, I can't remember what happened, but I realized that he picked up an object to hit me, so I ran out the door. And how it was like a masonette, but it's flat.
Right.
And so I ran out the door into the passage. So he's thrown this thing, but my daughter at the time, she was running behind me. I think she was maybe about 2 or 3 years old. And it hit her in her head. And that was the first time throughout the whole scenario of everything that was happening that I saw red. Literally, I saw red. And I remember turning around to go back in and I was like, I don't care what is going to happen today, because I just saw my daughter got hit and that it just wasn't happening. You could hit me, but not my child. Even though she wasn't his aim. Unfortunately, she got in the crossfire. And I remember turning back to go in and he managed to shut the door before I could come in. And at the time I had bought a car, because I bought the car, I paid for it, I wasn't allowed to drive it. So it became his car. And when I couldn't get to him, I saw a brick. And I went out there and I started mashing the car, mashing. Wow. And people would have thought, but your money bought it. But I was like, I don't get the use of it. So it's not mine. My money bought it, but I didn't get the use of it. And I remember mashing the lights, and this is how I know that I was losing myself so much, because that's something that is just so far from what I would do. And I didn't even realize at that point that, I don't know if it was the brick or the glass cut my hand. My hand was bleeding. But I walked and walked, because it was almost like I was going through this realization of, Michelle, look at what you've done. Look at what he's brought you to. Or look at, he's bringing out definitely the worst out of you. And I remember just walking far up the road and sitting down on the wall, and my hand was just bleeding. I just sat there and I heard sirens and the police officers, and it was police officers coming, and I guess they were looking for me. And then they found me. It was a van, 2 men and a woman. I never ever forget. Right. And they came and they said, oh, they got a call, etc., etc. Was it me? I said yes. I was just very peaceful, very open with them. They radioed, because there was more sirens coming, the 30 cars. Mm-hmm. And they radioed to tell them, we found the person. I don't think we need you guys. We'll deal with it from here on out. And bless you, they were absolutely lovely police officers. Glad to hear that. They didn't put handcuffs on or anything. They said, for some reason, we just know that they asked, do you have any weapons on you? No. Okay, no problem. So we'll take you to the station, because they had to take me to the station. They didn't lock me up. They just sat down, and one of the police officers came over and he said, tell us what happened. And obviously I just said, we had an argument. I got angry and I mashed the car up. And they said, no. Tell us what happened. What did he do? And it's almost like they knew, because they were like, you just don't come across the type of person that would do this unless something serious happened. What did he do to you? They gave me so much opportunity, and I didn't say anything.
Wow.
And to know he was the one that called them and said he looked out his window and saw a mad woman mashing up his car. So really, he's the one that called the police on me. But yet I never told the police what he did.
Wow. I mean, I'm really pleased that you had a good experience with the police, and I do know that they have stepped up their training around domestic abuse issues, and that was obvious when they spoke to you that something must have happened, you know, that to provoke that kind of response and and breaking point, for you. So yes, and there are similar issues that happen within both of my books as well, where when the women do blow up, it's extreme and it comes out of nowhere.
They've held it all in for so long. They've been silent for so long, and when they get to that point, because the last time that he had the opportunity of laying his hands on me, it was a full-blown fight this time, because I got to the point where it's like, nah, no more. And I fought back. It was a full-blown, and I think he was surprised.
Absolutely.
He was shocked because it was a full-blown fight. And I was like, okay, yeah, this is it. For me to get to this point, no, that's it. I can see clearly I'm losing my identity here. I'm losing. And the moment when I realized, like, he's got me to the point where I'm thinking, I must be the problem. And that's what happens with women. I'm like, I must be the problem. So you know what? I'll remove myself from the equation so everybody else can live. So yeah, let me take my life so that everybody else can live.
Oh my.
You know what I'm saying? And it scares me to know that there's so many women out there that they're going through this, and they're going through the silence, and they're scared to say anything because they're thinking, the man has embedded themselves so much that the woman doesn't think that I can survive if I move on away from this. I can't take the children away from me. The children are going to despise me, or you know what. But I would like to encourage them to say, you know what, you're going to have to make a choice. It's between you and the individual, and you can't love the individual more than you love yourself.
I always say this when people ask me about, how do they know that they're in a good relationship? How do you turn things around and make things, and go on to have good, positive, healthy, relationships. And I always say to women to love their partners 100%, but to love themselves 101%. And take that 1% and carry on with your education, carry on with your self-development, carry on with your passions, your dreams, your 100%. Hopes for the future. So I'm not saying to you to love him 99% and love yourself 100%. I'm saying love him 100%, but love yourself more. Yeah. You have to love yourself more. And I want to take this opportunity really to let your listeners know that the National Domestic Abuse Helpline number is 0808 2000 247. And they can discuss, if they've lost ties with family and friends and colleagues, because some women aren't allowed to work, or they make it very difficult for them to stay at work, then speak to professionals who are trained to advise you properly and help you formulate what your exit plan might look like. Because some women don't want to leave their homes. It's their house. It's their house. Yeah, they bought it, or their names are on the tenancy, and they've invited this man who's supposed to love them into their home, and they don't want to leave. There are women who have no money. They have no permanent leave to remain. They're worried about what's going to happen to their children. There are loads of questions around divorce and so on. Discuss it with the National Domestic Abuse Helpline people who are there to advise them and to support them properly. So I think we had a murder this week that's been in the news where she told her husband that she wanted to leave, and he killed her. And with her dying breath, she was able to tell the police it was her husband that did it. I think he threw her off a mountain. And what I'm saying to you is that if the woman decides to leave, do not announce it. You know, I just recently I advised a friend to do the same. If you're going to leave, then just leave.
Just leave.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but leave in safety.
Yeah.
The moment that he has a clue that you want to go, there may be resistance, and that's when you're putting yourself in a very unsafe place.
And that's why a lot of women are
unplaced
scared
situation.
to leave. Yeah, they're scared
you know
to
what?
leave.
I applaud every woman that's been able to do so. It must take so much courage.
It does.
To to go.
Just
I mean,
say,
my couples work with domestic abuse charities and so on to get out of their situations and to get into women's refuge. But on the day itself, other readers have told me when they've read my books, they have been on the edge of their seats wondering, are these women are going to get away or are they going to get caught? And the other thing is, if you decide to leave, don't go back. And we have seen.
I'm glad that you said that, because I was going to ask that based on what you had mentioned before, that some actually get to go back into the relationship, and you know, boy, kudos to anybody that has done it and it's worked. But for me personally, with my experience, I could not trust that. It would be so hard for me to trust going back into that same environment, that same space. It's almost like you've done it once, you've done it twice, you've done it 3 times. The next time is death. That's what they say, right?
Yeah, a probation officer colleague of mine wrote a book called Murdered by My Boyfriend. And fortunately for her, it was picked up and turned into a film production.
Wow.
But unfortunately for me, it took me ages to watch it. I must have watched a snippet, and it was so real to the stories that I've heard women tell me that it took me a long time to watch it. But you can find those productions on YouTube and so on. But Murdered by My Boyfriend, you just see the isolation, the loss of her employment, getting pregnant very, very early. And then him almost being jealous of her being pregnant as well, and not protecting her, but being jealous of her. And the beating that he gave her, she, you know, it was like an out of body experience for her when she was, you know, she's narrating the story from the grave. It's just horrific. So, but all these kind of things raise awareness, really, because you know, as I said, 2 women each week die because of domestic abuse at the hands of their partner or former partner. So for some women, the relationship is over, but the man is still stalking them.
I had that.
You know, they're stalking their children, they're using their children against them, you know, so even a phone call, you know, to the child, it's supposed to be asking the child how they are, but you're saying, how's your mum? Who comes to the house?
I was stalked for a year and a half.
Who's there? Right, so you're aware of some of the issues.
I would come out and my car would be keyed. My car got keyed so much to the point where it was not recognizable, because it's almost like he wanted to let me know I was here last night. I've driven to my friend's house, spent some time there, ready to go home, come out, all of my 4 tires were slashed. I've left the house, come back, just quickly gone to the corner shop, come back. You know, you just pull out like a £20 out of your purse, leave the purse on the bed, came back, my purse was gone. I went to work, came home, my clothes were cut up. What wasn't cut up was taken. And the police couldn't do anything, because they were like, even though I was saying it's him, they're like, we have no proof.
Of course.
You know, it got to the point where I got so scared, I had to have a friend come to the house sometimes to stay there just so that I could go sleep. You know, I've gotten up already to take the kids to school and I had to climb through the window. My door was barricaded from outside. So I can really relate with a woman that's in that position.
Yes.
And I want to encourage anyone that is watching, and you have to realize that, you know, domestic abuse is not just physical, it's also mental. Sometimes the mental ones can even be the worst. I guess it's time. You know what I'm saying? It's time. I don't know how long it's been happening for you, but it's time, because it makes no sense that you're alive but you're dead, because that's how I felt. I was alive, but I was dead because I wasn't living for myself.
Yeah, and I want to let people know that domestic abuse is survivable.
Yeah.
Women get through it and they come out the other end.
Definitely.
And they go on to do really well in their professions or whatever it is that they want to do.
Yeah.
They are better parents and their children thank them for leaving the situation.
Yeah.
You know, a particular family I'm thinking about, on the day that they moved to a women's refuge, her daughter said, "Thank you for doing that," because you could imagine the amount of stress that children go on to. Her boy needed a lot more support and a lot more counselling, but her daughter thanked her for being brave enough. It would have to be the bravest thing to do to exit a relationship, to escape a relationship, not really certain about how things are going to work out. But, you know, they are MPs, they are doctors. You know, I spoke to a doctor only last weekend who hasn't told me the full story yet, but I got the impression from what she was saying that it was a situation that she needed to escape from. She's now a pediatrician. She's doing really well. You know, there are social workers, there are teachers, there are people in every profession around you who are able to come through the other side and be well.
Well, I look at it this way. The worst thing is death, isn't it? So if you're looking at it from a fearful point or fearful perspective to say, I don't, you know, I'm scared of what's going to happen for me financially, etc. if I come out of this relationship, well, which one is worse? You not coming out of it alive, or you coming out of it alive and still being able to make something of your life? I didn't know I would be doing what I'm doing today, you know.
And you know what, Michelle, if I can say, you don't look like what you went through.
Everybody says that.
Absolutely amazingly well and happy and contented and, you know, self-actualizing. Having this platform where you can help other women, you know, is phenomenal. So well done to you for being able to share your story in this interview as well.
No, thank you very much. But I think the way I look at it is somebody may be saved from this. Even if it's just one, that's a lot. One is better than none.
It's the same when I wrote my books. That wasn't my the purpose. That wasn't my objective. Yeah. But when women contact me and they said, "Oh, Pam, you know, I read your book like I read the Bible," and you know, my awareness levels around the issues were raised as a result, or you know, I was able to end a relationship that I knew wasn't going very well. Before you know, I saw all the red flags that was in it. It means so much to me. The book has already done, you know, so much more than what I anticipated
and that's
it to be.
That's a legacy that you'll be leaving behind, even after you've left this earth thousands of years from now. That is something that will be here and that will make a difference to someone. I always have a saying that I say where, if it comes back to me now, a story not shared is a message not heard and a life not saved.
Oh, absolutely. That was quite a profound statement. And I do get a buzz from knowing that my book is in an airplane hangar somewhere, held by the British Library. I love the idea that, you know, grandchildren, great grandchildren, you know, are able to say that you know Pam was my ancestor was an author and you know, changed the world around her. So she couldn't change the world, but she changed the world around her. And for some women, it's made a huge difference to you know, what they decided to do with their lives next. And I'm very proud of the book and the doors that has been able to be opened to me as a result.
Well done. No, I love that. And I will be digging into my copies. But yeah, thank you so much, Pam, for sharing your story and your journey, you know, and for making your mark here on this earth. So yes, you are an iconic woman, because an iconic woman is somebody that is representing woman. And you are doing that. And so we're very grateful for what you're doing. And I will be making sure that your link will be shown for your books, so that people can get access to those books, because I think it's very important for them to also be able to get to read as well some of what you were speaking about. So that will be available. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in. And once again, thank you, Pam. It's a joy to be here, to be able to touch on these topics. You know what, guys, if you know anyone that this topic today will be a blessing to, or will be answered prior to, please do not hesitate to share with someone, because somebody out there needs our help. Not just me and Pam, but also you. So remember to go out there and be iconic. Be that iconic woman that you were created to be. Bold, beautiful, and blessed. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you on the next podcast.
Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Iconic Women Show. We look forward to having you again. So don't forget to subscribe and do the 3 R's. Leave your ratings, reviews, and recommend to your family and friends.